Okay, another question. This one from listener Daniel Junas. He asks, could you comment on the question of whether feminism, by downplaying sex differences between men and women, created or at least contributed to the ideological precondition for the emergence of transgender ideology? Yes, is the quick answer to that. Yes. Okay, so I think that entirely unwittingly, radical feminism, which now finds itself completely at loggerheads with transgenderism, did indeed create the ideological conditions necessary for transgenderism to take off. Now, I think that transgenderism largely actually depends on material conditions. So if no one had invented the various surgeries on hormonal interventions that permit people to pass as the opposite sex, I don't think this would ever have become a thing. I mean, there were some people in the early mid 20th century who attempted to have sex reassignment surgery. It invariably went very, very badly. It's only really in this century that it's become possible for people to choose medical interventions which make them pass quite convincingly as members of the opposite sex. These are cosmetic interventions. They do still have very bad side effects. They often still don't actually work. People never pass and end up in this sort of tragic liminal state that they can't escape from. But that combined with the internet, combined with high degree of affluence, and all of the sort of all of the late modern characteristics of our culture, all were instrumental in creating transgenderism. But the ideological point, yes. So radical feminism says that the psychological differences between the sexes are trivial. The innate psychological differences between the sexes are trivial, or indeed non-existent. So that the claim is that evolution stopped at the neck, and apart from presumably parts of the brain responsible for governing the reproductive systems, men and women are psychologically identical at the population level, and all of the stereotypes associated with masculine and feminine behaviours and temperaments are not just a product of culture, but are the product of patriarchy. That these are stereotypes that exist in order to keep women in their place and assert male dominance. And the differences that we see in the lab between men and women on traits like agreeableness, neuroticism, aggression, sexuality, etc., are all products of primarily childhood socialization. Now, I don't think it's implausible that there is some degree of men and women being sort of channeled by socialization into sort of further embedding the existing differences between them in terms of temperament. I think, though, that the idea that these are entirely a product of socialization is very implausible, partly because that we see such consistent differences between men and women cross-culturally. There is no culture on the historical record, the anthropological record, where women are as sexually aggressive as men or more sexually aggressive as men. And no, I do not believe all the men's rights activists like conspiracy theories which say that there's this enormous well of female sexual violence which is being ignored, right? I think that stereotypes, and again, I'm just echoing social science research here, are overwhelmingly very, very accurate, actually. Like, contrary to the standard progressive left view that stereotypes are pernicious and misleading, maybe in some instances they are pernicious. They're not misleading, though. Like, stereotypes are very consistently true, at least about groups. There will obviously be individual exceptions, but the reason that we generate stereotypes is because the human mind is very, very good at pattern matching, particularly when it comes to important things like the behavior of other human beings. And this is how we make sense of the world, through generating and reproducing stereotypes. So all of which is to say, I don't think the radical feminist view of the blank slate when it comes to male and female psychology is true. I think that there are some innate differences between men and women at the population level. So we're often talking about overlapping bell curves. There will be outliers in every direction. There'll be, a large area of overlap where men and women are very similar. say in a trait like neuroticism, women will tend to be more neurotic than men are. So that is, women are more vulnerable to negative emotion than men are. But at the very tippy tail, you're going to see more, very neurotic people are more likely to be female, very non-neurotic people are more likely to be male, etc. You see these differences across the population. The radical feminist insistence that that isn't true has been quite influential, and I think it has set the stage for transgenderism, in the sense that once you've already accepted that psychological differences between the sexes are trivial, it becomes much easier to then make the further claim that physical differences between the sexes are trivial. So if you believe that we are basically in the brain department all kind of amorphous gender goo, there's no way of differentiating between a male and a female brain really, and you have access to all of this medical technology which allows you to use cross-sex hormones, do very radical surgeries on the breasts and genitals to make someone cosmetically, physically similar to the opposite sex, why not claim that that person then is indeed a member of the opposite sex? Like, in what sense? Like, if you don't think that there's some important innate difference between men and women at the psychological level, and if you have the capacity to change people radically at the physical level, then men and women indeed can just basically become one another, can swap places. Now, of course, radical feminists are dead against male people having access to female spaces and male people identifying as women. So most radical feminists would be very cross indeed to be accused of having unwittingly set the ideological stage for this movement, which they're very opposed to. I do think that it's true, though. So yes, in answer to the question, most radical feminists would not like this answer, but yes, I think that ideologically, radical feminism unwittingly set the scene for transgenderism.